At a party, three rich women all fall for the same man at the same time. The man seems to be aware of this and walks towards them. The women are overjoyed, thinking that their chance has come. They all hope that they will be the one chosen, but the man doesn't even look at them. Instead, he goes to the mirror and admires his handsome face. Secretary Kim comes to ask what's going on, but Hao Yu cuts her off. Hao Yu immediately asks Secretary Kim how he looks. Secretary Kim replies without hesitation, perfect. Hearing this, the self-confident Hao Yu is very pleased. As the youngest president ever, Hao Yu is handsome, rich and talented, but has a strange quirk of not allowing any woman to touch him. Even his family thinks there is something wrong with his orientation. Only Secretary Kim, who has been in the position for 9 years, has this privilege. Secretary Kim is outstanding in her abilities, and works 24 hours a day, taking care of the president's personal image in a very competent manner. And Hao Yu has always believed that he is the embodiment of perfection, the kind that radiates light from all over his body. But this day, Secretary Kim actually submitted her resignation. Hao Yu froze for a moment and asked why it was so sudden. And Secretary Kim's reply was personal reason. The arrogant and overbearing president acted carefree, and looked like he didn't care, and casually said, I see. He couldn't sleep until late at night, and couldn't understand why Secretary Kim had acted that way. The next day, he confidently believed that Secretary Kim had not resigned from her position for real. But Secretary Kim said she would find him a new secretary as soon as possible. Hao Yu, who didn't understand the reason, confided in a friend. His friend analyzed that Secretary Kim had worked for 9 years, and was experiencing a period of fatigue, just like a couple. Hao Yu suddenly had an idea. He had never given anyone a second chance, but he found Secretary Kim, and immediately promised to double her salary in the future, as well as a car and a house. Afterwards, Hao Yu said he would work hard in the future. But with such generous treatment, Secretary Kim still chose to resign. His friend laughed at Hao Yu and said that he would suffer the same fate. Then he asked Hao Yu to think about the motive for Secretary Kim's resignation. A series of recent events came to mind, and suddenly he thought of the girl who had deliberately approached him. He had wanted to send her flowers and get rid of her. But Secretary Kim burst into tears. Hao Yu seemed to have an answer at that moment and immediately stood up excitedly. Secretary Kim must like him, but he didn't know that Secretary Kim was allergic to pollen. When she bought flowers for him that day, her nose was running and she sneezed non-stop. Hao Yu, who was full of self-confidence, mistakenly thought that Secretary Kim liked him. He then invited her over, handed her the flowers, and said, don't cry anymore. It's embarrassing. After Secretary Kim sneezed, she was so scared that she quickly put the flowers in the trunk. Seeing her holding back her tears of emotion, Hao Yu laughed again and immediately asked why she was resigning. But Secretary Kim replied that she was going to find her own life. Hao Yu was devastated at this moment. Couldn't the years spent together with her be her life? The next day, as soon as he arrived at the company, Hao Yu couldn't wait to ask her what she meant by finding her own life. Secretary Kim said that she was already 29, and it was time for her to fall in love and get married. After some careful consideration, that night, he went to Secretary Kim's home, hoping that she would continue working for him, and then said, let's get married. Secretary Kim immediately leaned in to smell him, thinking he had drunk too much, and was talking nonsense. After spending 9 years together, Secretary Kim knew Hao Yu too well. He thought he was perfect, and always felt that no one was good enough for him, no matter who he fell in love with. It was always the woman who got the short end of the stick. The next day, the new secretary came over to hand over, and seeing that Secretary Kim was about to leave, made Hao Yu feel very depressed. He just couldn't understand why someone as perfect as himself would be rejected by Secretary Kim during the handover. Secretary Kim saw a photo from 9 years ago. Her thoughts suddenly returned to the year she was 20. As a newcomer in the workplace, she was reprimanded by Hao Yu for a mistake full of grievances. She vented her dissatisfaction and angrily tendered her resignation. However, when she calmed down, she regretted it. Once she resigned, how would the family's debts and her sister's tuition fees be paid? Just as Secretary Kim was saddened by this, Hao Yu sent a text message asking her to continue working tomorrow. In response, Secretary Kim was extremely grateful. It was at this moment that she began to work hard to improve herself. Even for trivial matters such as tying a tie, she had to do her best. Her efforts have significantly improved her abilities. Thinking back to the past, Secretary Kim sincerely thanked Hao Yu for his tolerance. Since there was no schedule for this afternoon, Secretary Kim planned to leave work early. However, Hao-yu deliberately found an excuse to keep her there a little longer. But under his scrutiny, Secretary Kim made everything perfect. His unrelenting perfectionism made Hao-yu lose all confidence. Although he is a domineering CEO with a net worth of hundreds of billions, he is still a novice when it comes to relationship. He once again sought advice from his friend. His friend told him to be bold, careful and thick-skinned, and to occasionally get a little romantic. But proposing suddenly is so abrupt that no woman can accept it, and he has to impress her with his utmost sincerity. For this reason, Hao-yu decided to start with the romance. He learned that Secretary Kim had invited colleagues to dinner, so he rushed over immediately. A dinner with colleagues is supposed to be a relaxed and happy event. However, the sudden appearance of the CEO made everyone nervous. He never participates in these kinds of occasions, but in order to pursue Secretary Kim, he wanted to break with tradition and blend in. Several people straightened their backs and looked particularly constrained. Hao-yu wanted to break the awkward situation before anyone knew it. The conversation had turned to work. Everyone's mood instantly hit rock bottom. They began to flatter Hao-yu, who was very pleased. Then they all joined in singing. But such a bad place. Hao-yu didn't want to stay for even a minute. He immediately instructed Secretary Kim to book a luxurious private room. Watching his colleagues jump and dance, Secretary Kim laughed heartily. The confident Hao-yu asked her if she was so happy because he had come to the party. Secretary Kim was stunned for a few seconds, and had to say yes. Then he took the initiative to offer fruit. Secretary Kim mistook it for something he didn't like, and was about to throw it away. But Hao-yu said, "I'm taking care of you." After the party, he walked Secretary Kim home. Before parting, Hao-yu proposed to start a relationship with her, but Secretary Kim rejected him outright. She said she only liked gentle and considerate men. Hao-yu was simply not her type. The arrogant and domineering CEO suffered a blow in an instant. Unexpectedly, even he, who was so perfect, was rejected. "I have done so much today. Isn't that considerate?" Secretary Kim did not argue with him, and just wished him to find the right person soon. Then she turned around and left, leaving a bewildered Hao-yu behind. He was unwilling to accept this and immediately sent a text message to Secretary Kim, questioning whether she was crazy and not in her right mind. "He is handsome, rich and talented. What is not to like?" The self-righteous Hao-yu made Secretary Kim unable to tolerate him. She rolled up her sleeves and confronted Hao-yu, saying that he was selfish and completely disregarded other people's feelings, and that all the emotions that had been suppressed for 9 years were now spilling out. And that made Hao-yu's face turn black with anger. The next morning, Hao-yu was tying his tie when he thought about the old Secretary Kim. How attentive she was back then, and that sweet smile was really nostalgic. Now Secretary Kim was going to resign, and this made Hao-yu feel uneasy. When he arrived at the company, he seemed like a different person, and even refused to let Secretary Kim help him tie his tie so she wouldn't have to do it in the future, and thanked her for her hard work over the past 9 years. Hao-yu then said, "I will approve your resignation, but you still have to work hard for another month to do the handover." When she heard this, Secretary Kim was not very happy, but instead she felt an inexplicable sense of loss, and only the new secretary was assigned to her work, which she was not used to at first. She wanted to quietly listen to what they were saying, but unexpectedly, the next second, she pulled the curtains closed. Secretary Kim was very depressed. Is this necessary? However, this is just Hao-yu's ploy. That night, Secretary Kim and her friends are having dinner in a restaurant. They receive a questionnaire, but the questions have nothing to do with restaurant reviews. Question 1. If you had someone you liked, where would you most like to go? Question 2. If you had someone you liked, what would you most like to do? Question 3. If you had someone you liked, what gift would you most like to receive? Secretary Kim feels that the tone of the questionnaire is familiar, but she doesn't think much of it and fills it out. Sure enough, this was all arranged by Hao-yu. Next, it's time to get moving. That night, Secretary Kim was invited to the amusement park by a colleague, but the place was already closed. Just as she was wondering, suddenly the lights came on, and that was when Hao-yu made his entrance. He then invited Secretary Kim to go in together. The two experienced all kinds of thrilling rides, but the carousel was Secretary Kim's favorite. Seeing her happy like a child, Hao-yu couldn't help but smile. When Secretary Kim was young, her family was poor. Even after she started working, she never had the chance to come here and play. This time, she was able to fulfill a small wish. When they were tired, they went to a restaurant that they had booked for themselves. Hao-yu cut the steak for Secretary Kim with great care. After they had eaten and drunk their fill, they went to a luxury cruise ship. As the fireworks rose into the sky, Hao-yu took off his jacket and put it on Secretary Kim. At that moment, she seemed to be deeply moved. The two looked at each other and realized that something was wrong. They quickly looked away from each other. Secretary Kim had an unforgettable evening. Hao-yu was also immersed in it. When it was time to say goodbye, he took out a doll and gave it to Secretary Kim. Thinking about the romantic kiss in front of the door on the questionnaire, just as Hao-yu slowly approached, Secretary Kim immediately blocked him back and told him to be careful on his way back. Although he didn't succeed, Hao-yu realized that giving is more fulfilling than receiving. The next day, Secretary Kim found a necklace in the pocket of the doll. However, she didn't write on the questionnaire that she wanted to receive this gift. She wanted to return it, but Hao-yu said that he had specially picked it out for her. Suddenly Secretary Kim noticed that his tie was crooked. She had done this countless times before, but this time it made her heart beat so fast that she couldn't look at it. Secretary Kim immediately ducked and turned around and left. When she put on the necklace, she was very happy. Hao-yu, who had been secretly watching, also smiled with satisfaction. Secretary Kim received a call from her sister asking her to go on a blind date. Unfortunately, this conversation was overheard by a colleague. Soon Hao-yu also learned about it. However, he was not panicked. It was only because he had just given Secretary Kim a romantic date. Hao-yu firmly believed that her blind date would not be successful. The two met at a coffee shop. The other person noticed that Secretary Kim seemed to have something on her face and was about to take it off for her. When a colleague happened to walk by and filmed it, soon the news that Secretary Kim was in a relationship spread like wildfire. When Hao-yu saw this, he was completely dumbfounded. He never expected the two to be so intimate. Secretary Kim was saying goodbye to the other person. When she saw that the man's tie was crooked, she immediately went up to help him fix it out of professional reflex. However, this scene was being watched by her boss, who liked her. When she heard the boss call her name, Secretary Kim panicked and almost strangled the man to death. She didn't understand why Hao-yu reacted so strongly. She thought there had been a mistake at work, seeing that he was silent. Secretary Kim tentatively asked if he was angry because she was on a blind date. The arrogant CEO was unwilling to admit that he was a jealous person. He said insincerely that this had nothing to do with him. Then Secretary Kim asked if there was a big event tomorrow, and I was busy with personal matters. Is that why you're angry? Hao-yu replied on the spot, "You're right," and then scolded her for being ridiculous. Secretary Kim suddenly noticed that a leaf had fallen onto Hao-yu's clothes. She tried hard not to laugh, but Hao-yu noticed it anyway. Secretary Kim then removed the leaf. The two came into close contact and looked at each other. Seeing that something was about to happen, Secretary Kim quickly came back to her senses. Hao-yu told her to do well in the sports day tomorrow. Then she left. The energetic Secretary Kim passed through the various levels and won the first round. Seeing her cute appearance, Hao-yu can't help but like her. But in the next competition, Secretary Kim has to cooperate with a colleague who is outstanding in appearance. The two of them are leaning on each other, and Hao-yu instantly loses his composure. The more he looks, the angrier he gets and he starts to shiver. He drank 9 bottles of mineral water in a row. In his anger, he decided to cancel the company sports meeting starting next year. But just as he was about to leave, he sprained his foot. Secretary Kim helped him to his feet and took him home. Just as she was about to apply ice to Hao-yu's foot, she saw a circle scar on his ankle. Secretary Kim, who didn't know the reason, didn't ask. At that time, Hao-yu asked if he had a good time at the sports meeting. He also said that she was too focused on the ranking. Secretary Kim was speechless. It was obvious that Hao-yu wanted her to win the championship. She was exhausted, but he was making sarcastic comments. Hao-yu questioned her, saying that she could hug a stranger just to win the championship. Secretary Kim replied, "Of course, it's better than losing the competition." After hearing this, Hao-yu was instantly upset. Then he grabbed Secretary Kim. "If that's the case, what would you do?" Just when something was about to happen, the ice pack suddenly fell, and the two immediately came to their senses. Hao-yu then asked Secretary Kim to stay the night, which made her instantly think bad thoughts, while Hao-yu just felt that it was too late, and was afraid that it wouldn't be safe for her to go home, and realized that he had misunderstood, and embarrassed. Secretary Kim turned white. Suddenly, Hao-yu received a phone call, and then told Secretary Kim that she couldn't stay the night. Just as he was leaving, Secretary Kim accidentally bumped into a man. At this moment, she didn't know that this person was Hao-yu's brother. When he saw that Secretary Kim's shoelace was untied, he offered to tie it for her. After they apologized to each other, they left. Secretary Kim couldn't help but feel that this was so considerate, much better than Hao-yu. When the two brothers met, Hao-yu didn't seem to welcome his brother's arrival and told him to leave after a few words. That day, the two of them came to the company library, but there was a sudden power outage. Secretary Kim immediately called to ask about the situation. When Hao-yu turned around, he saw Secretary Kim turning on the flashlight, so scared that he almost died where he stood. Secretary Kim said his startled expression was quite cute, but then he suddenly realized that he had said the wrong thing. The always arrogant and domineering CEO immediately retorted, saying that he was not cute, but had a fatal attraction. Secretary Kim agreed and turned away in disgust. It was a bit awkward for a man and a woman to be together in the dark, so Secretary Kim looked for a book to read next to her. Hao Yu couldn't help but be entranced as he watched her. This was the first time Hao Yu had ever thought that Secretary Kim was so beautiful, and didn't know when the electricity would strike. The two decided to come back another day. Secretary Kim was worried that Hao Yu might fall, and took his hand to lead the way. Hao Yu suddenly stopped. Secretary Kim mistakenly thought he was angry and quickly let go of his hand. But then Hao Yu took the lead, holding her hand. In order to hold an opening event for the library, Secretary Kim suggested inviting Morse, a writer who had just returned to the country, to attend. This would help raise the library's profile. Just then, Hao Yu suddenly received news that his brother had come to the company. He then deliberately distracted Secretary Kim by asking her to go buy lunch. Who came to recommend his new book? Hao Yu impatiently said he was busy. The sensible brother had no choice but to leave. However, as soon as he arrived downstairs, he met Secretary Kim, who had rushed back. The two recognized each other at a glance. The brother didn't want to miss the opportunity to meet a beautiful woman. Secretary Kim wanted to refuse, but he kept stopping him. He had no choice but to leave a fake number, and he took the opportunity to see Secretary Kim's name tag. Mom and Dad called the two brothers to dinner. The brother asked about Secretary Kim. Hao Yu, however, refused to say anything. His brother asked if he was afraid of falling in love with Secretary Kim after getting to know her. He couldn't understand why Hao Yu hated him. Unexpectedly, Hao Yu said that he didn't hate him, but looked down on him. His brother angrily said that if he hadn't done something bad back then, he would have been the CEO. Hao Yu said that his brother was not only weak and incompetent, but also bullied others to protect himself. It was clear that the two brothers had some long-standing misunderstanding. The elder brother was so angry that he punched him hard, just as Hao Yu was about to hit him back. His parents arrived in time to stop them. Seeing the two brothers fighting made them feel very sad. After Hao Yu left, the elder brother received a phone call. It was an invitation to the opening of the library. What Secretary Kim didn't know was that the pen name Morse was the same as Hao Yu's elder brother's. At that moment, Hao Yu drove to Secretary Kim's house without knowing it. He stood downstairs for a while before leaving. At that time, Secretary Kim happened to be returning from shopping and noticed the injury on Hao Yu's mouth. She quickly pulled him into the house. When she opened the door, she was stunned. The house was in a mess, and she had forgotten to clean up. In a hurry, she pushed Hao Yu out the door and told him to wait a minute before coming back in. Then she quickly cleaned up. In particular, she had to hide her underwear. She was also clever enough to cover it with a doll. Since Hao Yu had a fight with his brother, Secretary Kim treated his wound for him. Suddenly, the two locked eyes and the atmosphere was extremely ambiguous. The two, who were aware of it, immediately separated. Then Secretary Kim went to cook instant noodles. Hao Yu, curious, looked around the house for the first time since he had come. At that moment, he noticed the doll on the bed lying on its back. He was about to turn it over when Secretary Kim, sensing something was wrong, hurriedly came to stop him. Unexpectedly, she lost her balance and fell into Hao Yu's arms. The embarrassed Secretary Kim was about to get up, but Hao Yu tightly embraced her and said, "Just once is fine." Secretary Kim was about to be moved to tears, but the arrogant CEO said that it was written in the book just now. The two have a good impression of each other, but neither wants to take the initiative to admit it. Early the next morning, Secretary Kim received a call. Hao Yu actually came to pick her up for work. Secretary Kim ran downstairs in a panic, thinking that there was something important in the company, but accidentally kicked onto the road, and this time, she was sent straight into Hao Yu's arms. Secretary Kim apologized repeatedly, but he said there was no need to apologize, which came as a big surprise to Secretary Kim. Then she ran to get the car. Hao Yu immediately stopped her and said he would drive. He even thoughtfully opened the door for Secretary Kim to get in. Hao Yu praised her for looking beautiful today. He said it would be even better if she didn't dress so sexy in the future. Just as Secretary Kim thought he was being a bit too controlling, Hao Yu took out the heart-shaped breakfast he had prepared specially. He was being so nice to her suddenly. Secretary Kim was really a bit uncomfortable. The two arrived at the office. Secretary Kim cut her hand while tidying up some documents. Hao Yu would handle things as carefully as she did. This series of unusual actions made Secretary Kim feel uneasy. His friends advised Hao Yu to confess confess quickly. Anyone who procrastinates is annoying. But he had never been in a relationship before, so he didn't know how to start. He wanted to ask where a suitable place to confess was, but he was vague and didn't want to explain. The employees recommended a barbecue restaurant or a roadside stall. He had no choice but to search online. Before work was over, Hao-yu asked Secretary Kim to have dinner together. For this reason, she went to the mall to choose clothes. However, just as Secretary Kim was going to the appointment, she suddenly received a phone call from the writer Morse asking to meet. It happened to be the same place he had agreed with Hao-yu. Secretary Kim came over on her way. What she didn't expect was, the man she had met twice before was the writer Morse. He also gave her a book he had written. Hao-yu, who was waiting, decided to go and meet Secretary Kim. When he saw her with her brother, he took the book and returned it. Secretary Kim had no idea about their relationship. Learning that the invited writer was her brother, Hao-yu immediately asked Secretary Kim to cancel the collaboration, but went to great lengths to invite Morse, which made Secretary Kim very angry. Before he could confess, the two had a falling out. His brother mocked him with glee. What's there to be afraid of? In order not to disappoint Secretary Kim, Hao-yu temporarily agreed to collaborate with his brother. After returning home, Hao-yu wanted to apologize to Secretary Kim, but after hesitating for a long time, he still didn't send it. Yesterday he said resolutely no, but today he's changed his mind. Secretary Kim came looking for him to question him, but Hao-yu didn't know where to start. Secretary Kim was angry with him for not explaining why, and said that she had been misunderstanding him recently, again falling in love with him, and wanting to marry him. She didn't know if Hao-yu was sincere. However, she learned from a colleague that Morse was Hao-yu's brother. This came as a big surprise to Secretary Kim. Thinking back to when Hao-yu said that his relationship with his brother was not good, Secretary Kim then realized that she had wrongly accused him. Both of them wanted to apologize. In the end, Hao-yu took the initiative to speak, and Secretary Kim felt that she had done something wrong. After apologizing to each other, they made up. In the evening, the two worked overtime until late at night. Hao-yu suddenly said that Secretary Kim made it impossible to work with peace of mind. At this moment, the atmosphere became extremely tense. Hao-yu suddenly got up. The arrogant CEO finally confessed his love to his beloved Secretary Kim. But just as the two of them confirmed their relationship, Hao-yu pushed her away. Secretary Kim was at a loss. What had happened? It wasn't until the chair hit the wall that it stopped. For a woman, this was undoubtedly the greatest humiliation. Secretary Kim suddenly came to her senses, and said that he was a narcissist who only had eyes for himself, and must have been thinking, just you wait, you're not good enough for me. Hao-yu wanted to explain, but Secretary Kim didn't give him the chance, and immediately took a day off. Hao-yu's mind flashed back to his childhood memory, and the childhood trauma that he could never forget. Secretary Kim, who was deeply shocked, confided in her sister, who said that it might be a dysfunction, or some kind of psychological trauma. Secretary Kim thought that Hao-yu might really have something difficult to tell. However, what kind of experience did he have? This made Secretary Kim puzzled. Hao-yu wanted to send a text message to explain, but deleted it after editing. In the end, he just sent an apology. A simple apology was all he had to say to dismiss himself. The more Secretary Kim thought about it, the more angry she became, so she pretended to be calm, and asked Hao-yu what happened. This indifferent tone. Hao-yu racked his brains trying to figure out why Secretary Kim was like that. At the doll Hao-yu had given her, and instantly remembered the sweet moments she had shared with him. Suddenly, without noticing, she was pushed out again. She thought about how she had closed her eyes and been full of anticipation. It was really embarrassing. The next day, Hao-yu came again to show Secretary Kim the place she held in his heart. Not only did he decide to be her secretary for a day, he also promised to do whatever she asked. Secretary Kim was delighted to hear this. It was worth a try. First, she took Hao-yu to experience what it was like to ride on a bus. The overbearing CEO, who had never ridden on a bus before, didn't even know where the handrails were. With Secretary Kim's reminder, he finally realized that he had to hold on here. Before long, there was an empty seat. Hao-yu asked her to sit down first. Secretary Kim habitually asked the CEO to sit down, thinking that she was the boss today. She didn't hesitate to sit down. Suddenly, there was a sudden stop. Hao-yu was unprepared. He sat directly on Secretary Kim's lap. The passengers all laughed at him for not having having the strength in his legs. It was so embarrassing at that moment. The two went shopping to catch a doll, and ate street food together. Seeing how Yu compromised for her, Secretary Kim finally calmed down. The two parted reluctantly. The next day, Secretary Kim received a phone call. She had news about the abduction case from that year. When she was young, she was abducted together with a little brother. At the time, she was so scared that she cried. The little brother not only comforted her warmly, but also gave her candy. With his help, Secretary Kim was able to hold on. Over the years, she has been asking people to secretly investigate the whereabouts of that little brother. She learned that the eldest son of her group was also a victim in the 4th grade, and it is very likely that he is the person she is looking for. However, Secretary Kim thought that the second son was also in the 4th grade at the time. Yu had said that he should have been in 2nd grade. Due to his intelligence and amazing bone structure, he was a good seed. He even skipped 2 grades and was in the same class as his brother. Coupled with the scars on Yu's feet, Secretary Kim concluded that the little brother is him. The benefactor who had given her a sense of security was right by her side. Secretary Kim was so excited that tears filled her eyes. Yu then asked her to organize his bookshelves when she had time. Secretary Kim immediately said she would go tonight. Yu couldn't figure out why she was so cooperative. Secretary Kim replied, "I will also give you support. I'm really happy to see you again." Yu was caught off guard by these words. They had only parted last night, but they were so happy to see each other again today. It seems that she is deeply infatuated with him. Yu was about to go out. At that time, Secretary Kim stopped him and asked to tie his tie for him. She then said, "I'm sorry for not meeting you earlier." Secretary Kim says something nonsensical from time to time, which makes Yu mistakenly believe that she is head over heels in love. Compared to yesterday, the relationship between the two has deepened at least 3 times today. In order to make up for the regret of not being able to catch a doll last night, Yu decides that he must catch one no matter what. When he gives the doll he caught to Secretary Kim, she is so moved that she is in tears. However, a colleague who admires the writer Morse reveals a piece of news to Secretary Kim. He wrote an article about being abducted as a child. When Secretary Kim read it, she realized that it was exactly the same as her own childhood experience. In order to confirm who had helped her when she was young, Secretary Kim immediately asked Yu about it. Hearing this, Yu understood why Secretary Kim had suddenly changed. Secretary Kim asked about the ligature marks on his ankles. Yu just said that he had accidentally hurt himself when he was young. Subsequently, Secretary Kim found Yu's brother. He also felt that the two had a connection. When they were young, they were even locked up together, but his brother said that he might have suffered a blow at the time, and his memory is also intermittent and not very clear. That night, Secretary Kim came as promised to organize the bookshelf, and accidentally found Yu's application materials for the secretary position. Among the dozens of applicants anyone pulled out would be better than her. And why did Yu choose the unremarkable herself? When asked about this, Yu just told her because you are Secretary Kim. Secretary Kim thought he must have known her before, but Yu explained that because she was the worst, and would be more willing to work hard, because she was afraid that if she was too good, they wouldn't be able to handle it. Hearing this, Secretary Kim felt a little disappointed. Looking at her resume, Yu recalled the Secretary Kim from 9 years ago. He recognized her at first glance. Perhaps Yu was the younger brother Secretary Kim was looking for, but she didn't recognize him. That day, Yu's brother asked Secretary Kim to meet him. He talked about the time they were abducted together, and hoped to go with Secretary Kim to the place where they were imprisoned as children to look for memories. But as soon as he came out, he met Yu, who sent Secretary Kim away with work as an excuse, and then told his brother not to see Secretary Kim again. But his brother instead felt that it was Yu who had prevented the two from developing. He believed that meeting Secretary Kim again was a marriage predestined by fate. Before leaving work, Yu asked Secretary Kim if she wanted to accompany his brother to find their memory. He hoped that Secretary Kim would say no, but in the end, he didn't get the answer he wanted. His brother waited here early. The two came to search for memories from the past, and then went to the restaurant, where Yu was feeling very depressed, and vented his anger on the punching bag. His friends advised him to be a man, and seize the opportunity if he liked Secretary Kim. Then she received an urgent message from Yu, and his brother personally brought Secretary Kim over. The two brothers immediately confronted each other. Secretary Kim tried to mediate, and asked the brother to go back first. Seeing the two chatting so intimately, Hao-yu suddenly became jealous. It's only been a day, and he's already calling his brother. When Secretary Kim asked about the work arrangements, Hao-yu said he was hungry. It was an emergency. He even asked Secretary Kim to quickly cook him some instant noodles. Secretary Kim had no choice but to take him to the ramen restaurant. Hao-yu asked her to look forward and not dwell on the past. This will only make the relationship between the two ambiguous. Secretary Kim questioned what kind of relationship the two had. Hao-yu said it was ambiguous. This word is simple but can represent a lot of emotions. Secretary Kim was at a loss for words after hearing this. Before leaving, Hao-yu once again said that he was handsome, rich and talented, so there was no need to waste any more time, and that getting married would be best. Hearing this, Secretary Kim was moved. However, after Hao-yu's confession, Secretary Kim decided that he was not being sincere, and that he was just being swept away by jealousy. The overbearing CEO was rejected once again, and Secretary Kim only left behind a smile that was worth pondering. But Hao-yu was not going to give up. The next day, he volunteered to join the company trip. As he arrived, the employees instantly lost interest, and even the watermelon in their hands became nervous. Hao-yu made his intentions clear. He had come to put an end to the ambiguous relationship with Secretary Kim, and win her over completely. In the game that followed, there was no doubt that Hao-yu and Secretary Kim were in the same group. However, at that moment Secretary Kim received a phone call. Hao-yu took the phone, and saw it was his brother. He immediately answered that they were busy. Secretary Kim was angry and left. Just as she was going back, it started to rain. Luckily, Hao-yu arrived in time, and used his jacket to protect her from the rain. The two of them found a pavilion to take cover in. Unbeknownst to them, Secretary Kim saw a spider, and screamed in fright. Quickly docking, Hao-yu grabbed the spider and threw it out, and took out some candy to reassure Secretary Kim. This scene reminded him of being locked in the dark room. At the time, little brother also took out candy to comfort himself in this way, and it was then that Secretary Kim developed a fear of spiders. Hao-yu persuaded her not to go searching for those sad memories. Because of that incident, Hao-yu's parents and brother were in pain for a long time. He doesn't want Secretary Kim to suffer that pain again. However, she understands Hao-yu's intention, but Secretary Kim still says that she has always lived for her family since she was young. She has never felt the feeling of being cared for. At that time, it was her little brother who protected her, so she implores Hao-yu not to stop seeing his brother. Hearing this, he decides to do as Secretary Kim wishes. It was dark when the two returned. Secretary Kim had always been curious about why he had pushed her away during their last kiss. Hao-yu just said that once he closed his eyes, he would think of something terrible. Secretary Kim thought he was playing with her again, and turned around and left. At this moment, everyone had already eaten and drunk their fill, while the two could only eat instant noodles to make do. But whatever you eat tastes so good with someone you love. The next day, Hao-yu left first. He told Secretary Kim to relax and unwind, and hoped to come and visit after the trip was over. Secretary Kim was looking forward to that, and dressed up nicely to go find Hao-yu when she returned. But a woman's wardrobe is always lacking that one decent dress. In the end, she chose one that she was quite satisfied with. When she saw Secretary Kim's sweet and lovely appearance, Hao-yu, for the first time, sincerely praised her, because he hadn't been able to eat barbecue the last time Hao-yu had specially prepared it, but his cooking skills were lacking, and the meat was burnt. With no choice, the two had to order takeaway. When she saw that sauce had got on the corner of Secretary Kim's mouth, Hao-yu took the initiative to reach out and wipe it off for her. Their eyes meet, and the mood is just right. The two don't stop, but this time Hao-yu still can't shake the psychological shadow. Secretary Kim gives an embarrassed smile, and asks him where he'll push himself this time, to which Hao-yu feels very apologetic. Just then, President Park suddenly arrives at the house, and the two instantly part like they've been electrocuted. Secretary Kim shyly flees, spoiling the domineering president's good deed. His friend collapses on the ground, apologizing repeatedly. A helpless Hao-yu gives him a hard stare. On the way home, Secretary Kim is very puzzled. Why does Hao-yu always act so scared at critical moments? There must be some kind of secret. Secretary Kim shyly flees, spoiling the domineering president's good deed. His friend collapses on the ground, apologizing repeatedly. A helpless Hao-yu gives him a hard stare. On the way home, Secretary Kim is very puzzled. Why does Hao-yu always act so scared at critical moments? There must be some kind of secret. The next day, when Secretary Kim comes to work, she happens to run into President Park. He apologizes for what happened yesterday. What Secretary Kim is concerned about is the scar on Halyu's leg. President Park says that although the two have known each other for many years, Halyu has never mentioned this before. Secretary Kim is still upset about this. Halyu sees this and mistakes it for Secretary Kim being upset because the kiss didn't work out. He feels very guilty about this. At that moment, Secretary Kim suddenly felt hungry. Fortunately, there was still a piece of candy in the drawer. Halyu wanted to explain, but he was so flustered that he didn't know how to start. In a panic, he snatched Secretary Kim's caramel and put it in his mouth without saying a word. This made Secretary Kim so angry that she almost died. After eating the candy, Halyu's mouth also became sweet. He promised that he would definitely try to overcome it. That day, when his mother learned that the person who had been abducted at the same time was actually Secretary Kim, so she hurriedly asked her to come over to her house and ask her about it. Secretary Kim only remembered being locked up in a very small and cold place. After entering the room, there was a boy hiding in the corner of the hall shivering. Hearing this, the mother was heartbroken. She said her son is very afraid of the cold. When he got lost, he was only wearing a cardigan. The mother recalled that when she was young, her brother always bullied her younger brother. One day, her younger brother suddenly fainted. When he woke up again, he had amnesia. Halfway through her words, her brother suddenly arrived. Secretary Kim noticed that there were no injuries on her ankle. That night, Secretary Kim had another dream about that incident and woke up startled to see a message from Halyu. Secretary Kim opened the curtains and saw him downstairs. Halyu gave Secretary Kim a box filled with caramel candies. Halyu apologized for eating all his candies, and most importantly, he missed her. However, the reason Halyu gave Secretary Kim the caramel candies was because he was thinking about the two of them when they were little. Back then, Halyu promised to give her lots of caramel candies, and Secretary Kim also hoped to marry Halyu when she grew up, and they even made a pinky promise. But why did Halyu refuse to admit that he was the one who had been by her side back then? It was the day of his brother's book launch, and he took the opportunity to confess his love for Secretary Kim. Halyu, who was standing nearby, heard this and angrily left. Secretary Kim chased after him and explained to him that she had not promised her brother anything, and she didn't want the two of them to misunderstand each other because of this. The two of them looked at each other with love in their eyes. Halyu couldn't help but want to kiss Secretary Kim, but he still couldn't shake the shadow. However, this time Secretary Kim took the initiative to give him a kiss. After being rejected many times, the two finally came together. Halyu couldn't wait to announce the good news to the world. As soon as they confirmed their relationship, he hoped that Secretary Kim would marry him as soon as possible. Secretary Kim felt that he was being too hasty, but after all, the two had been together for 9 years. In the end, they reluctantly parted. An excited Halyu returned halfway again. Secretary Kim looked puzzled, but Halyu said he was afraid that he would think about her so much that he would be unable to sleep all night. This cheesy line of love made Secretary Kim look all shy. It was only after Secretary Kim persuaded him that Halyu was willing to leave. People in love unconsciously raise the corners of their mouth. Right? Halyu, who is usually diligent, actually fell asleep in the office after work. Secretary Kim carefully covered him up. Just as he was about to leave, Halyu suddenly got up and took her in his arms. Worried that his colleagues would find out, Secretary Kim quickly got up. The two went to the cafeteria to celebrate their official relationship, but it seems that they haven't gotten into character. Secretary Kim is still taking care of Halyu as usual, which makes Halyu confused about whether they are in a relationship or not. In order to change the situation and let Secretary Kim feel the love, Halyu not only copies the documents himself, which makes the staff panic, but also makes tea himself and asks Secretary Kim to taste it. This abnormal behavior Secretary Kim is not yet used to. She is so flattered that she accidentally burns her mouth. Halyu is worried and goes up to check. The intimate behavior of the two is seen by all their colleagues. Halyu had a brainwave and lied that he and Secretary Kim had decided to hold an eye contact activity as a way to thank the staff for their hard work and then look deeply into the eyes of each employee. This whimsical idea finally dispelled the suspicions of the crowd. However, this also made Secretary Kim very unhappy. This did not make her feel at ease, but rather uncomfortable. She suggested that Halyu should be clear about the company and not be treated specially just because they were lovers. Secretary Kim did not agree. This made Halyu feel very aggrieved. The two also had a little unpleasantness because of this. Secretary Kim also realized that even if it was her fault in the past, she would accommodate Halyu, the CEO. But now she pointed out the mistake without any hesitation. When they finished work, the two waited for each other to speak first. Hallyu was very depressed. Why didn't she mention reconciliation? Secretary Kim was also depressed. Why didn't she say let's have dinner together? They stared at each other for a few seconds, but no one spoke first, and in the end, the two just parted awkwardly. The arrogant and domineering CEO was in a dilemma. He didn't understand why Secretary Kim was like that. The two had already confirmed their romantic relationship, but once they were at the office, she always seemed cold towards him. His friends reminded him that if there was a problem, he should deal with it immediately, or the consequences would be unimaginable. So that night, he went to her door with a gift. Secretary Kim said that their positions in the company were different, and that was why they deliberately kept their distance. She sincerely apologized to Hallyu. The two of them quickly resolved their conflict by being honest with each other. Hallyu suggested that they be on a first-name basis, and that Secretary Kim call him brother. But after 9 years of being superior and subordinate, she couldn't bring herself to call him that, even though she was very courageous. At that moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Secretary Kim knew it was her two sisters. In a hurry, she quickly shoved Hallyu into the closet. When they saw the food on the table, they immediately guessed that Hallyu must have been here. The two of them had always had a prejudice against this overbearing CEO. They also said some things that Hallyu found hard to accept. Secretary Kim found an excuse to quickly send the two of them away. When she opened the closet, Hallyu was dumbfounded with a face full of grievances. She questioned how Secretary Kim had introduced herself. Secretary Kim's way of apologizing made it hard for Hallyu not to forgive her. I'm sure you don't want to read the next part, so I'll skip it. The next day, Secretary Kim received a text message from Hallyu's brother asking for a meeting. This time, she decided to make her feelings clear. Secretary Kim came to the appointment and made it clear that she only felt grateful towards her brother, and had no further thought. Her brother, however, talked about how Hallyu had left him on the roadside, which had led to him being abducted. He wanted to use this to keep Secretary Kim, but then Hallyu suddenly appeared. The brother said that he is still in pain, but he is living so carefree, and has forgotten everything that is not good for him. Hallyu is not moved and warns his brother not to bother Secretary Kim again, and then takes her away. It is getting late and Secretary Kim suddenly feels a bit cold. Hallyu takes off a jacket in the car. Secretary Kim feels that this jacket is very special. Hallyu mentions that his mother's friend really likes him, and often designs clothes for him specially. Secretary Kim suddenly thinks of what Hallyu's mother said when Xiaoxian was lost. She was wearing clothes designed by her best friend. Could Xiaoxian be Hallyu? His brother's name is Li Chongxian. Could Hallyu have another name? I was young at the time, so I might have confused the pronunciation. Hallyu's childhood name was probably Li Chongxian. Secretary Kim, who was suspicious, tried to call out the name. Hallyu subconsciously answered. This shocked Secretary Kim. He woke up when he sensed something. But when Secretary Kim asked about the abduction that year, Hallyu did not admit it. To confirm this, Secretary Kim found Hallyu's mother, and asked if the CEO had changed his name. Hearing this, the lady's face instantly changed, and Secretary Kim guessed that the little Xian mentioned by the lady was Hallyu. But she said that she had been locked up with Secretary Kim. It was her brother Chang Yuan. When pressed again, the lady said she was tired and asked her to go home first. With no choice, Secretary Kim had to leave. After she came out, she happened to meet Chang Yuan. Secretary Kim asked him if he remembered what happened back then. The brother said that whenever he remembered something, he would feel self-loathing. Unintentionally, she saw a photo of the two brothers. In an instant, she remembered what Hallyu looked like as a child. Secretary Kim asked her brother which photo was him. The brother replied that the one on the left was himself. This made Secretary Kim even more certain that Hallyu was the younger brother from back then. Then why did they both say it was Sung Jian? Back at the office, since Hallyu's schedule has been quite full recently, he began complaining that he hadn't been able to see Secretary Kim all day, and hoped that she could go to her house in the evening. Secretary Kim's mind immediately started racing. Hallyu teased her, wondering what she was expecting. It's just some paperwork. Secretary Kim immediately agreed and called him brother. Hallyu almost couldn't hold back after hearing that, but he was definitely pleased. He even asked her to continue calling him that next time. After work, Secretary Kim arrived at the house early. Hallyu had just finished showering and came out in a bathrobe. Secretary Kim shyly turned her head. He had to go inside to change clothes first. At that moment, he saw the bruises on Hallyu's ankle. Secretary Kim's heart ached, and her eyes momentarily reddened. Suddenly, her sister called and learned that she was at Hallyu's house. Her sister was very opposed to her dating the arrogant CEO. Secretary Kim said that Hallyu was not a selfish person, so don't worry about the relationship anymore. Hallyu heard all of this. He mistakenly thought that Secretary Kim was crying because her sister was opposed to it. For this reason, he decided to conquer the two sharp-tongued sisters. After finishing their work, they sent Secretary Kim home. She suddenly looked for something in her bag, and turned her head to find a red star beating furiously. Hallyu instantly became aware of it. Secretary Kim's face turned red with shyness. Hallyu took off the moon, but when he turned around, Secretary Kim covered her face and ran away. Hallyu threw the moon into Secretary Kim's room to illuminate her every night. He learned that Secretary Kim had a date with her sister on the weekend. Immediately, he came over. His sister thinks Hallyu is selfish and not from the same world as his sister, and they don't want the two of them to get together. But for the sake of his beloved Secretary Kim, Hallyu wants to prove to them that he is not different from them. So he goes to a cheap cafeteria and wonders how such a restaurant can make money. His sister advises him to leave if it's not convenient, but Hallyu insists on staying at the table. His sister keeps saying crab and says she's hoarse from eating it, but she keeps on eating it anyway. Hallyu looks puzzled and wonders why she keeps eating even though she is full. The eldest sister says that the more you eat, the more you save. Hallyu seems to understand. Then he starts to wolf down his food, regardless of his appearance. Seeing how much he can eat, the eldest sister is shocked. Hallyu mistakenly thinks that the eldest sister is complaining that he is not getting his money's worth. He is about to get up and get some more food, but the boss lady is furious. She urges him not to work too hard. Secretary Kim quickly pulls him back. He tells him that he has already gotten his money's worth. Hearing this, Hallyu is finally satisfied. Then he can't stop burping and left the restaurant. The older sister was going to go clam digging. Hallyu volunteered to go with her. The older sister said that he had always taken the easy way and would never be able to take the rough way. Hallyu immediately said that as long as he was with Secretary Kim, he would be able to overcome any obstacle. Hearing this, Secretary Kim was speechless. The younger sister looked incredulous. The older sister was fed up and thought that Hallyu was just blowing hot air. When the group arrived at the beach, Hallyu was nowhere to be seen. The two sisters said that he was useless, and that he was just blowing hot air. Secretary Kim was not happy to hear this. She said that the two sisters didn't understand him at all. Just then, Hallyu made a handsome appearance. The few people were simply shocked. Eldest sister mocked, "What's the use of just having good equipment? The real skill is digging more." For this reason, Secretary Kim proposed a competition. Eldest sister and second sister formed a team. She and Hallyu formed a team. The person who loses will have one wish granted. The two sisters were unwilling to lose on Hallyu's side. Only Secretary Kim was flustered. He was curious about what wish he was going to grant. Secretary Kim said it was to make his sister stop hating him. Hallyu secretly rejoiced and instantly became passionate, but she was inexperienced and either dug up rocks or got her feet stuck. Seeing that they were going to lose the competition, he gathered all his strength and picked up the rake. In the blink of an eye, he filled a bucket. In the end, the two of them won the competition. Hallyu said that even if his sisters hated him, it was fine, but please continue to pay attention to his next performance. Seeing Hallyu's hard work, the two sisters had nothing to say. When they were about to leave, the eldest sister almost slipped. Hallyu reacted quickly and helped her. The eldest sister felt her hand was cold. Secretary Kim was very anxious. Maybe it was because she ate too much just now, and she caught a cold here. Then the two hurried to the doctor. The news was so arrogant the president actually came here and was rejected. The second sister couldn't stand it anymore and she fought for Hallyu. With Hallyu's hard work, the two sisters also accepted him. "I think my sister doesn't care if he is rich or not." But this sincere heart and his kindness to his younger sister really touched them. That day, Hallyu's mother was torn between Secretary Kim's suspicions and her discussions with her father about whether they should stop hiding the truth. Then he found Chonghyun and told him the truth about the abduction 24 years ago. He learned that it wasn't him who had been abducted but Hallyu. This made him feel confused and even blame himself. Chonghyun found Secretary Kim and wanted to ask her about the situation back then. At the moment, a show was being performed on stage. When she saw the pair of red high heels dangling in the air, Secretary Kim remembered everything from that year. This painful memory scared her, and in a panic she fainted on the spot. It was 24 years ago. Since Secretary Kim's mother had passed away not long ago, she woke up in the middle of the night and ran outside. At that time a woman happened to pass by. She mistook her for her mother and chased after her. The woman lied and said she wanted to take Secretary Kim to find her mother, and then locked her in a small dark room. There was also a boy with his hands and feet tied up. Secretary Kim was so scared that she cried, worried that she had angered the woman because of this. The little brother not only comforted her but also gave her candy to eat. The woman lost the baby she was carrying because she was abandoned. Her heart was twisted, so she wanted to take the two children with her on the road. Just as the woman was about to do it, Hao-yu persuaded her to forget about the despicable uncle and start her life again. His pleading awakened the last shred of conscience in the woman. However, she still chose to end her life in front of the two children. In order not to frighten Secretary Kim, Hao-yu lied that it was a big spider. He endured the fear, got the scissors at the woman's feet, and untied Secretary Kim. Hao-yu told her to close her eyes and escape. Secretary Kim returned home and promised Hao-yu that she would marry him when they grew up. However, Hao-yu was deeply traumatized. He was haunted by this memory. He always had the same nightmare. His brother was very afraid when he saw him like this. Hao-yu was very smart and loved by others. This made his brother jealous. One day, he took Hao-yu to a remote place. Just then, the woman found them guilty. His brother became mentally ill, resulting in a reversal of memories, believing that he was the one who was abducted. Not only took over his brother's room, but also felt that his brother was the bad guy who caused him harm. The two brothers often fought because of this. Dad discussed putting his brother in a mental hospital. Mom found this hard to accept, and all of this was heard by Hao-yu. For the sake of everyone, Hao-yu fell off his chair at breakfast. After this, he pretended to have amnesia, and gave his experiences to his brother. When he was young, Lee Sung-hyun also changed his name to Lee Hao-yu. He also went to see Secretary Kim, but Secretary Kim had moved away, and no one knew where she had gone. For many years, Hao-yu lived a cautious life. He felt scared whenever he saw a strange woman, until the day he saw Secretary Kim at a company party. He recognized her at first glance, and so Secretary Kim became Hao-yu's secretary. She was not outstanding at work, but with Hao-yu's help, she grew quickly. 9 years also changed Secretary Kim. When his parents learned that Hao-yu had silently endured everything, it broke their hearts. His brother apologized to Hao-yu for the wrong he had done back then. As a family, Hao-yu did not resent his brother. It was just that the blowback then was too painful. The two brothers apologized to each other, resolving the conflict that had lasted for many years. After Secretary Kim was discharged from the hospital, Hao-yu took him to the amusement park. It turned out that this was where they had been locked up. Hao-yu had transformed this place into an amusement park. Those painful memories were buried, replaced by laughter and joy. At that moment, they talked about that incident without fear. I believe the two of them will continue to be happy. Hao-yu suggested that they focus on the positive, and use their strengths to compensate for Secretary Kim's weaknesses. He also proposed that she stay at his place at night, but Secretary Kim's father did not allow them to live together. Secretary Kim returned home, but was unable to sleep. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Hao-yu actually came to the door with his luggage. Secretary Kim was at a loss for what to do, but Hao-yu entered the house without any hesitation. He put his shoes and clothes in the closet separately, and arranged the daily necessities neatly, as if he already considered this place his home. Secretary Kim was extremely nervous. At this time, Hao-yu accidentally knocked something over, and the two went to pick it up at the same time. The moment their hands touched, it seemed like something big was about to happen. Secretary Kim came back to her senses, and hurriedly avoided it. Hao-yu told her not to worry, and said he was not available for a few days. Then he shamelessly squeezed into the bed with Secretary Kim, and said he had prepared a special pillow for her. This made Secretary Kim, who hadn't touched a man in 29 years, get wet hair. He was so flustered that he couldn't sleep. He took out the remote control bed and slowly raised it. He wanted to turn on the TV to ease the situation, but he happened to see a bunch of lovers in love playing game. The two of them watched and their mouths watered. The embarrassed Secretary Kim quickly clapped her hands in approval. Hao-yu had already prepared for this. He suggested drinking some red wine to help sleep, but Hao-yu forgot to bring the corkscrew along. Secretary Kim's mind was wide open. He put the wine in his shoes, and then slammed them against the wall. This move left Hao-yu dumbfounded. He was reminded that if he missed, 20 million would be gone. Secretary Kim was so cautious when she heard that it was so expensive that she quickly put it back. Suddenly, there was the sound of someone moving a car downstairs. The aunt scolded Hao-yu for parking so recklessly, and driving such a nice car in such a small house. Fortunately, she persuaded the young man not to be too proud, and embarrass Hao-yu. Secretary Kim felt bad about this. For this reason, she decided to go to Hao-yu's house. Secretary Kim then moved moved into the spare room. Hao-yu came running again, saying he was worried that she would be scared. He immediately got under the covers and said he would stay with Secretary Kim. This awkward scene was no different from the previous one, so Hao-yu decided to sing a lullaby. As the melody began to play, pictures of the two of them together gradually emerged. When he turned his head, he saw that Secretary Kim had already fallen asleep. Hao-yu leaned over and kissed her forehead. Secretary Kim also gradually snuggled into his arms and hugged him. When he woke up the next day, Hao-yu sat beside her with a dazed look in his eyes. Secretary Kim asked him why he had woken up so early. In order not to disturb Secretary Kim's sleep, Hao-yu had not slept at all that night. Before leaving, Hao-yu said sternly that he could not guarantee anything tonight. Secretary Kim was very depressed. She couldn't bear to think about what he couldn't guarantee. It was the long-awaited night. The two pretended to be reserved and exchanged pleasantries. Then Hao-yu proposed to have an in-depth exchange. Tonight, the two of them must open their hearts and be honest with each other. As the mood gradually got into place, Hao-yu untied Secretary Kim's bow. But just at this critical moment, there was a sudden phone call. President Park reported an emergency at the company. The foreign partner had decided to terminate the contract. For this reason, Hao-yu decided to travel to France to discuss the renewal terms in person. Secretary Kim, waiting in the living room, thought about what had just happened. She was so embarrassed that she blushed, so she picked up her glass and drained it in one go. When Hao-yu finished his work, he discovered that Secretary Kim had fallen asleep, and thought that she would not be able to see her for a whole week, and that he could not miss tonight no matter what. Hao-yu tried to wake her up, but Secretary Kim was so drunk that he had no choice but to carry her back to her room. A simple kiss ended this unfortunate night. The next day Secretary Kim woke up, and thought that she had drunk too much last night, and was struggling to figure out how to explain it to Hao-yu. Unexpectedly, he was sitting next to her, and learned that Hao-yu was going on a business trip. Secretary Kim immediately packed his luggage for him, since Secretary Kim had a lot of things to deal with, and could not go with him, which made Hao-yu very reluctant. The two then took a photo together, and looked at it whenever they missed each other. They had not even reached the airport yet, and they were already missing each other. A short week had felt incredibly long to the two, although they had video chats whenever they had time. Without the other person by their side, they always felt uneasy. Hao-yu finished his task ahead of schedule, and could not wait to fly to Secretary Kim's side. As soon as he arrived at the office, he dismissed everyone else, and came up to Secretary Kim, and gave her a sweet kiss. After work, Hao-yu asked Secretary Kim to go to his place, saying that they still had things to do, and Secretary Kim instantly felt uncomfortable. Just then she received the news that her father had been hospitalized. Secretary Kim rushed to the hospital. Thankfully her father only had a ligament strain. He had loved rock and roll all his life, and wanted to let loose during the performance, but none of the audience responded to him. Due to having to accompany her father, Hao-yu's romantic evening was ruined again. He wanted to go and say hello. Secretary Kim knew her father's temper, and asked Hao-yu to meet her another time. When he got home, Hao-yu couldn't sleep. He sent a message, but Secretary Kim didn't reply. In the morning, Hao-yu went to the hospital early to see her. However, Secretary Kim had gone home to get something for her father. When her sister heard about it, she rushed over. Secretary Kim finally had some free time, and returned to the office. Hao-yu once again asked her to go to his place that night. Secretary Kim said that she had been working non-stop since yesterday. It was like she was a bulldozer. Hearing this, Hao-yu was so embarrassed that he kept scratching his head. He couldn't understand why Secretary Kim was acting like that. His friends advised him not to rush things. He would only annoy the other person, so he decided to slow things down. Secretary Kim felt a bit let down when she heard this. That night, she came looking for him. She said she wasn't going home that night. After all the suffering, Hao-yu finally got what he wanted. I'll show you the next scene for everyone. However, that day, the two of them could no longer hide their relationship. Hao-yu didn't choose to run away, but openly admitted that the two were dating. As soon as the news broke, everyone at the company started talking behind his back. He had a low level of education, and was still rising up the rank. Everyone thought she was using improper means. Secretary Kim encouraged herself not to back down. The next day, as soon as she arrived at the office, she heard the bad news. The product design developed by the company had been stolen. Everyone proposed remedial measures, but none of them could recover the group's losses. Hao-yu angrily turned and left. After learning about the situation, Secretary Kim came up with the perfect solution that night. Hao-yu was very satisfied after reading, seeing that Secretary Kim had only 7 days days left until her resignation deadline, made him feel very reluctant to let her go. It was precisely because of Secretary Kim's help that Hao-yu was so at ease at work. He didn't know what to do without Secretary Kim. Due to Secretary Kim's outstanding performance and personal abilities, the rumors that she had risen to power through her beauty were disproved. That night, Hao-yu walked her home. Secretary Kim made a decision, and that was to continue to stay by Hao-yu's side as his secretary. Hao-yu didn't want to make Secretary Kim feel guilty because of him, but she said that being able to stay by Hao-yu's side and work for him was what she wanted to do. Hao-yu was deeply moved and couldn't help but tear up. The two's relationship quickly grew warmer. This day, Hao-yu sent Secretary Kim to the hospital. Just as the two were about to part ways, her father unexpectedly found out. The future son-in-law was meeting his father-in-law for the first time, and was definitely going to show him. Her father said that Hao-yu was a heartless boss who only exploited his employee. Therefore, he did not approve of the two dating. Just when Hao-yu was at a loss for what to do, luckily the phone rang. This gave him an excuse to quickly leave, but as soon as Hao-yu left, his face changed. He even said that the more he saw the boy, the more he liked him. The reason he expressed his disapproval was purely to boost his daughter's morale. Then the two men had a minute conversation. Secretary Kim's father recounted his daughter's difficult experience supporting the family. For many years, he had been filled with guilt. No matter what Secretary Kim did, her father only hoped that she would be happy. Secretary Kim's hard work is obvious to Hao-yu. He is determined to protect her from any harm. That day, Hao-yu's friend's restaurant opened. He brought Secretary Kim to congratulate him. When she saw Hao-yu, the woman happily gave him a hug. The two have known each other since childhood and are very close. The woman even knows Hao-yu's signature move. Secretary Kim's mouth is twisted with anger. The woman even asked Hao-yu to open the bottle cap. Secretary Kim's anger instantly flared up. When leaving, she wanted to open the bottle of water to drink, but then she remembered what had just happened and started acting pretentiously. Secretary Kim must have been jealous. Although she denied it, she looked like she really cared. This made Hao-yu feel really good. That night, when Hao-yu went to Secretary Kim's house, he once again professed his love for her and asked her to marry him. Just as the two were about to get down to business, her father suddenly coughed. The two were suddenly scared and didn't know what to do. They then took Hao-yu outside to talk. Secretary Kim was also at a loss for what to do. Her father-in-law thought that his proposal lacked sincerity and can't just marry her off to him. Hao-yu promises to give Secretary Kim a romantic and unforgettable marriage proposal. Hearing this, the father-in-law is very satisfied. The two of them drink a glass after another with a happy heart. In the blink of an eye, the two of them get into the swing of things. At this moment, Secretary Kim is getting a little anxious, waiting. Unexpectedly, after 3 rounds of wine, they start calling each other brother. The father-in-law likes the son-in-law more and more the more he sees him. Secretary Kim rebukes him for getting drunk like this. The two of them have already talked about everything. The father-in-law even tells embarrassing stories about his daughter. This made Hao-yu absolutely ecstatic. When he woke up the next day, his image of being perfect was shattered. This made Hao-yu very annoyed. He tried every means to find an excuse for himself, and said that it was good to make a few mistakes occasionally, so as not to cause psychological pressure on Secretary Kim. In order to have a romantic marriage proposal, Hao-yu began to collect various methods. In the end, he decided to take Secretary Kim abroad for a break to take the opportunity to confess. But recently there has been a lot of business. Secretary Kim refused to go. With no choice, Hao-yu turned to friends for advice, but the previous plans all ended in failure. President Park racked his brains and suggested that Hao-yu should be sincere and unadorned, which might impress her more. When his mother learned that the two were dating, she was worried that Hao-yu's relationship with his brother would deteriorate as a result. However, his brother not only sent his sincere blessing, but also gave Hao-yu advice on his marriage proposal. Hao-yu seemed to have an idea. That night, he invited Secretary Kim to his home. She followed the candlelight as she walked. Hao-yu had specially prepared Secretary Kim's favorite caramel and a series of affectionate confessions, which made her eyes fill with tears instantly. When they entered the living room, Hao-yu even put on a talent show, and then knelt down on one knee, and said the 3 words he had been saving for a long time. Secretary Kim was moved to tears, and immediately agreed to the proposal. Hao-yu placed the wedding contract in Secretary Kim's hand, and gave her a deep kiss. That day, Mrs. Hao-yu called Secretary Kim to dinner. Hao-yu's mother had seen all the hard work Secretary Kim had done over the past 9 years. She really liked this prospective daughter-in-law. She had never seen such a good mother-in-law. She then took her to a luxury goods store. Secretary Kim just said that everything was beautiful. The mother-in-law packed it all away. She then asked her to choose some shoes. Secretary Kim just picked a pair while she was on all fours, and she bought them all. She then asked Secretary Kim if she had a bag. Secretary Kim was afraid that she would spend money again. The mother-in-law mistakenly thought that she also liked collecting bags, so she asked the salesperson to bring out all the new models. Secretary Kim was really at a loss for such a wealthy mother-in-law. The two families discussed the wedding date. The mother-in-law had everything ready. There were all kinds of jewelry. She even reserved a car for Secretary Kim. The villa was also nearby. However, Secretary Kim refused to accept these valuables. Perhaps too much giving is like too much asking. It can make people feel pressured. The mother-in-law apologized. It's just that she likes Secretary Kim too much. She wants to give her the best. The mother-in-law wasn't angry about it, but rather looked up to her. The wedding date was approaching. Hallyu specially selected a wedding dress for Secretary Kim, but she was busy with work all day long, and even forgot that Hallyu had asked her to come try on the wedding dress. When she rushed to the store, it was already closed. Although Hallyu didn't say anything, she still felt a bit lost. To apologize, Secretary Kim took her to a coffee shop. Hallyu seemed to think she had been here before. It suddenly occurred to her that Secretary Kim had a blind date here before. Secretary Kim, who was at a loss for words, hurriedly explained, "It's fine to cancel an appointment, but to make this mistake. After all, getting married is not a one-person job." Secretary Kim felt a lot of remorse, so she came looking for her in her wedding dress. When she saw the beautiful bride, Hallyu instantly lost her temper. The two promised each other never to part for the rest of their lives. It was only from her brother that Hallyu learned that Secretary Kim was allergic to pollen. For this reason, Hallyu apologized to Secretary Kim and replaced all the flowers at the wedding venue with fake ones, promising to make an effort to get to know her in the future. On the day of the wedding, Hallyu's nervous legs trembled. With the blessings of their family and friends, their happiness has just begun. May all the lovers finally become family. From now on, no matter what, they will always have each other. May everyone who watches this video find their true love. Thanks for watching this recap. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next movie recap. Stay tuned for more exciting recaps.